Okay, it is 4:30. I'm going to call this meeting of Dunn County's Judiciary and Law Committee to order. First order of business is a call of the roll. Supervisor Bauer.
Here.
Supervisor Gilbert.
Here.
Supervisor Wilsey.
Here.
Supervisor Vandermeulen.
Here.
Everyone is in attendance. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the February 27th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those? Supervisor Vandermeulen.
I have a question on it first, before you approve it. There was a typo, I think, in it. Did you see that? Was it corrected?
Yes, we just got it corrected.
Oh, okay, it was law enforcement. I was wondering if we had a new
Yes.
department that the police are collecting more revenue out of here. I didn't.
We got that fixed.
Did you? Okay, thank you. Supervisor Bauer seconds. Any further comment or discussion on the minutes?
I'll add a comment. I used to live in a very Dutch town and tulip festival, and the main street had neighbors who would kind of encourage each other to all mow their lawns at the same time. So there was law enforcement.
All right. So the minutes are approved. We have no public comments today. And so we will move into the staff reports. First up is the district attorney. We all have the reports in our packet. Anything you'd like to add?
No.
No, okay. Anybody have any questions for the district attorney? All right, we'll move on to child support. Josie, do you have any comments or anything you'd like to add to your report?
No, none.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? All right. Next, emergency management and 911. Anything you'd like to add?
Nothing to add.
Nothing. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any questions? Supervisor Wilson?
So getting help, is it just pay or hours or what do you think's going on there?
I think that our pay is fairly competitive for kind of the surrounding counties. I think it really comes down to, the hours and the commitment that we have of, the 24/7, and we're just unable to find people that, understand that that is a schedule that we're going to have to work, your entire career at Dunn County. The last person, I think understood that until it came to the point where they actually had to work it, and then, it just didn't fit into their current life. And, it's just hard. You can say it on a piece of paper, and, people say, yeah, that's fine. I can work a rotating schedule. But when you actually have to get down and do it and work, currently our schedule is a 5-2-5-3 rotation. So we work 5 days on, 2 days off, 5 days on, 3 days off. So it ends up that we work several weekends in a row before we get several weekends off. And then that can get a little frustrating too, when, you work, the entire month of May and half of June of weekends, and then you finally do get some off. So we're looking at, some options of possibly changing the schedule up a little bit, but I think it's maybe more based on, the nature of the job and the schedule than the actual money, in my opinion.
Did you have something, Carl?
I was going to ask whether you've experimented with a different schedule or whether other counties do it differently in a way that they found successful.
Yeah, we're considering looking at a 12-hour schedule so that they would work 12-hour shifts. Currently, the staffing that we have, we could run a 12-hour schedule with 8, which is what we currently have. The concern that I have, and, some of the staff is what do we do with time off requests and then also sick time? Some people suggest that when you go to 12 hours, you actually work more hours, but less shifts in a year. And so that, you know, when you're sick, it might not always be falling on a day that you're working. So that wouldn't be as hard to fill, but others, you know, don't agree with that and think that we'd actually have more sick use, because if you're working, you know, a couple 312s in a row, you can get wore down pretty easily. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is looking at 12 hours, but just making sure that we're going to make a good decision so that we don't have to, you know, go into 12 hours and, you know, 5 weeks into it, say this isn't working for us. The trouble we have now is people like their time off. They want their days off. So now if I post some shifts that are open, they can sign up for an 8-hour shift, and you used 8 hours of your day. You can still go do things after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or if you don't come in until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you have lots of time during the day to do some things. If you sign up for a 12-hour shift on your day off, that whole day now is pretty much set to work. And so that's the concern of, you know, part of the staff is if we're not willing to kind of help out now with the 8-hour shifts or pick up midnights because we don't like midnights, I'm sure not going to pick up a 12-hour shift of them. So discussions we're having, and, you know, we're trying to work through it. Mhm.
Thank you. The medical examiner is not here today. Any questions for her, you can send an email.
Yeah, she wanted me to just pass along. She didn't have anything else to add. She's busy on a fatal house fire that my agency and her agency is investigating.
Thank you, Sheriff. And you are up next for the Sheriff's Department.
Just a couple things to add. We are investigating another fatal house fire that, you know, I can't release much information on, that occurred last night up in New Haven Township. And so more to come on that and in the next few days. But we did interviews last week with deputy candidates. We have one more to do on Thursday this week. We have 5 current vacancies. We had 3 to 4 good applicants at face value. A few more, I'm quite certain, on a preliminary background are going to be eliminated on a background investigation. You know, with history of being terminated from agencies in the past and things like that that pop up. And so still working on that, but I think we'll probably get 3 or 4 good candidates out of this hiring process to fill the vacancies that we have. But I may very well be coming back as soon as next month and asking to do away with the eligibility list already, so we can move on and keep going through the process and try and gain some more applicants. A couple of the applicants in this process aren't even done with recruit school until May 24th. So I can give them a initial job offer, but I can't hire them and they can't start until after they're done with recruit school. So working with HR on looking at our civil service ordinance and trying to streamline the hiring process and make it more of an open enrollment, or at least a quicker process, so we don't lose candidates that sit around and wait for, you know, a month or 2 for the process. It's something that we can get them in the door, do an interview, do their physical agility, maybe even eliminate the written test. If you've got a college degree, you can probably read and write, is pretty much all the written test accomplishes. So we don't have enough applicants. Years ago, we used to have 60 applicants and you narrowed down the applicant pool by a test score. Well, we don't have, by the time we get to doing interviews, we have 10 people out of 26 that applied, you know. So working with HR on that, and obviously I'll be coming to this committee to for the first step in revamping our civil service ordinance, so we can maybe streamline that process a little bit and get good cops through the door and hire them as when they're available before somebody else snaps them up. So I think that's about all I have to add, unless you have questions.
Supervisor Vandermeer.
I'd just like to say that I'm glad to hear of the resolution of the case, the officer involved shooting. Andrea's report I appreciated, and your support for the deputy. I think together there's a sense that I can imagine from his point of view to feel as if it's been officially looked at and certified as, you know, a valuable public service, it must give an
Right.
officer like that a sense of reassurance and support.
And the last thing you want to do to a deputy who's been put in a position to use deadly force is treat them like they've done something wrong, you know? It's, you move on with the process as quickly as you can as an agency. Obviously, the DA needs to review the case. I obviously did an internal investigation separate than her criminal investigation and assured him that we found no policy violations and got him back to work when he was ready to come back to work. So, and I eventually want to show you the body cam footage or the squad and body cam footage to this committee, so you kind of have an understanding of what, you know, what they may have to deal with on a average Saturday night in Dunn County. So,
Thank you, Sharon.
thank you.
Any other questions for the sheriff? All right, thank you. Up next is the courts. Katie, anything to add?
No, I don't have anything additional to add. I don't know if the judges have anything to add. I see all three are here. No?
Okay. And the last report is the Criminal Justice Collaboration Council. Sarah.
So just want to add that we do have our education video out on the bail referendum that are going to be on the April election. There has been some media interest in that, so we are looking for anyone that's willing to speak to the media on the topic. And then also we were notified last Friday that we received another grant for medication for our jail medication assisted treatment project. So just more funding to keep that program going. And that will be routed through the admin committee, but I'll have some more details hopefully at our next meeting next month. That's all.
Thank you. Any questions for CJCC?
I had some questions on the referenda. Maybe for Judge Peterson. Sure.
Where should I go? Here?
Okay.
I was curious, I understood your need to be objective in it. And I appreciate your explanation of the difference between what is law now and what the referenda would produce. I'm curious what difference it'll make, do you think? For instance, would you have handled any bail or bond situations differently in the last year if this were in place?
Well, I can't answer any questions about specific cases. We tried real hard to make sure it was neutral and objective. In fact, we did get a request from WEAU to do an interview and I said no. And partly for that reason, because I don't want to get into the, taking one side or the other. But the big difference is, and I think one of my concerns is that if, in theory, I think that certain situations where it's dangerous and you have a violent crime, that's one thing. The reason I was really wanted to go along and do this video is to try to help explain the way things are, because we talk about a lot in the courtroom. And with law enforcement and the public, and some people will wonder why, because you can't order this cash bail to protect the public just for that reason alone. I mean, and we have to follow the Constitution, and sometimes, and I think that it would be a good tool as long as it's used responsibly. That is about the only commentary that I would put on there, because you don't want to start, in my opinion, you don't want to overuse cash bail, so that, if someone can post it and it can help assure protection of the public. But this is something we talk about every day in court. Whoever's on intake, the judge has to make bail decisions, bond decisions every day. And so you have to look. One thing the U.S. Supreme Court, or the U.S. Constitution requires, is that that it be an individualized decision. Very few cases on the Sixth Amendment, or is it Eighth Amendment? I'm sorry, Eighth Amendment. But the thing is that used responsibly for the right reasons, I think that, you know, it's a good tool to have. And, you know, one of the other things that I wouldn't want to say, I just don't, I don't want to get into thinking about what other judges do or have done in certain cases. But it is something that, you want to make sure that you respect the presumption of innocence, but at the same time, that you're making responsible decisions about release. And so I don't know. I'm really reluctant to give you too much of, editorialize on it, but it is complicated. And I think it's important that the public understand that right now, just simply for protecting the public, and the district attorney will tell you that we often have, it's an everyday thing. But I think in certain situations, I think it's warranted. I mean, the case that the referenda is kind of born out of the situation in Waukesha County where this guy out on bond, killed a bunch of people at the Waukesha Christmas parade. And, and I'll have to say, compliment the district attorney's office here because they do their homework, and we follow a process here. If we have someone, so that guy had been out on bail or on bond, and then he gets arrested again. And if that would have happened here, I think that, the district attorney's office would have said, hey, they were already out on bail. Now we can raise the bail. The Constitution allows us to raise the bail for someone who has violated the conditions of release. And so if you had that situation here, I don't think it would have happened, because they would have said, this person is out on bond. This happens pretty frequently, that there's a motion to increase the bail, which is the monetary part, for someone who has violated the conditions of release already. And it's a frustrating issue for law enforcement because, there's this thing that sometimes it's referred to as some counties are catch and release counties, and sheriff is probably familiar with that terminology. And, in a perfect world, people aren't going to commit crimes while they're out on bail. But the reality is that we often see some people end up with 10 files before the case is resolved. And we have been increasing bail, and we have some people keep violating it. But we really want to be careful and conscientious not to keep people in jail, before they're convicted, because the presumption of innocence. And this is just one for you, because in working on this project and working on the script for it, which was, well, where does it say in the Constitution there's presumption of innocence? Well, there's no mention of it in the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence or the Magna Carta. It's a fascinating history, which we don't have time for here, but there's no mention of proof beyond a reasonable doubt in the Constitution. So there are principles in our Constitution, in our law. That's why I refer to it as a bedrock principle. And we all agree on proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So you have to think about, but I don't know. I mean, if you have any other questions, I don't want to go on here because it's a fascinating topic. We, Sarah and a few other of us, it included an officer from the police department. Is it a lieutenant now? I don't know. I'm always reluctant because I can't remember if someone's a commander or a lieutenant, but we went to this conference in Fort Worth, Texas, and I spent a lot of time on bail. It was a National Association of Pretrial Services. And it was really fascinating. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about bail. If it is abused, it can ruin somebody's life. If you're innocent, you're accused. On the other hand, a society that can't protect itself is, in trouble. So I think it's very important that a very conscientious decision be made. And, there's tough decisions that have to be made by law enforcement and DA's office as well. Just even if you have somebody under investigation, the years I was a DA, just the fact that someone's under investigation could be very damaging to somebody. So you're very careful with those sorts of things because, not every allegation is true. And, but in any event, if anyone's ever served on a jury, you know how tough it is. It seems easy from a distance, but when jurors sit on a case, it's a different experience. And, you know, so that's the thing, is that if you have somebody who, you know, sits in jail waiting trial for a year and they're found not guilty, you know, maybe they got off and they were guilty, maybe they weren't guilty, you know? And so it's just one of those things we just have to be very careful of.
So would you say then that if I vote for that second resolution, I'm voting to give you more freedom to protect public safety?
I would say it'd be a fair statement. The more, you're giving judges more power. Because if I have somebody, you know, and this is really what I want to stay away from, but you know, you got me here long enough, okay? You can't tell me that judges in this state don't kind of look the other way when you got a first degree intentional homicide a lot of times, you know? And there is a statute, there is a statute that provides a pretrial detention, you know, no release, like in certain crimes, first and second degree intentional homicide, but you have to have a trial within 60 days. And that's not likely to happen. And most defense attorneys don't want to do that. But, you know, when you see $1 million cash bail, or, you know, and you got to couch it in terms of, you know, whether they're going to appear for trial or not. And, but again, if you got somebody who is violating the conditions of their release, you know, those are, I mean, I think our county, we've done a pretty effective job in dealing with those situations, but the one-off, you know, and it makes people nervous, you know, you have someone accused of a very serious violent crime, you know, and yet maybe they're employed and they're a local business person or something, and you don't have it, you know, they've always appeared in court in the past. But now they're charged with, you know, strangling their wife or something, you know, and murdering their spouse. You know, and I think most people would like to see a high cash bond, you know, but anyway, so it's something that is, for the people that deal with it every day in the trenches, it's an intense type of subject. And I don't know if the district attorney would want to comment on that, or the sheriff. But interestingly enough, you know, we do have this thing where we have this uniform bond schedule that's created, which allows for people to be released, less people being held pretrial, but theoretically it would be unconstitutional because it's just the same bond amount for everybody, for a battery or for a disorderly conduct or bail jumping. And it's not individualized. And but a lot of times, but we do signature bonds. And again, we try very hard to protect the public. And I tell you that, you know, that's just something that is everybody's nightmare that works in law enforcement. If you know, law enforcement officer lets somebody go, maybe they should have arrested him for drunk driving to go down the road and they kill somebody, you know, or, you know, you're the DA and you've got somebody accused of doing this horrible thing. And, you know, you're very much worried that they're going to hurt somebody else, you know, or, you know, you let somebody out, you're a judge, you let somebody out on bond and they do something terrible. So, you know, it's just one of those things that you just never know. So, but I think I've resisted mentioning specific cases, haven't I? So good. Okay. So any other questions?
I didn't need a specific case, but I was just curious overall, would there be more jail time in a given year if this were in place?
You know, I think you probably would, but I think the way that it's been tailored, when this initiative first came out, there were two bills that were introduced that would provide for requirement for a minimum cash bail, fairly substantial cash bail for anybody that had certain types of convictions. And the constitutional amendment just said, you know, you can have cash bail for any condition of bond, you know, and the final version, you know, that went through the legislature twice, limits the cash bail, well, to assure appearance in court. That's always there. But if it's a violent crime, they can take that into consideration and could use cash to protect the public. And so it's not like you can, you know, use cash bail to protect the public from someone writing more bad checks or from, you know, more forgeries and things like that. So, but anyway, I think I'm talking too long. So anyway, I hope I've answered your question best I could without treading onto territory I shouldn't get into. The judges make you nervous back there? Okay, but thank you anyway. Appreciate it.
I do got one question.
Sure.
How big a deal is it just taking out the bodily harm and just making it harm? I mean. is
I
a
think
big
that
deal, or-
I have no problem with that. I mean, I think that just makes sense because we recognize that, particularly, in stalking cases, for example, it is the emotional trauma is very real, and then sometimes damage, I think they're talking about greater than $2,500 property damage. That's a big deal to a lot of people as well. And I mean, let's face it, we have some people that get on a tear for a period of time. And I mean, we all know of when people have multiple files and so, but it's that balance we try to strike every day, a true balance, between presumption of innocence and due process and all of that and protecting the public. And so, but that's the thing. I mean, I think if someone's really worried about someone getting killed, they're gonna probably find some way to say it's necessary that they'll show up in court. I mean, but I've had people not show up for court for a lot of reasons in my career, both as a prosecutor as well as a judge. I've had people facing sentencing that committed suicide in jail, for example. I had a guy who went from a 5,000 cash bail or 10,000 cash bail to 5,000 cash bail, posted a 5,000 cash bail, and he committed suicide at the Cedar Falls Cemetery with zip ties. I'm sure if you're familiar with that case. So, I mean, if I, but that was, so it's just, you don't always know what's going to happen. If we locked everybody up that we thought would do something, then we wouldn't have enough room in the jail. So it's a very difficult thing. So that answer your question?
Yes, thank
Good.
you.
Okay. Thank you. Sure.
What the last phrase of question 2 says, the need, prevent witness intimidation and potential affirmative defenses. What on earth are potential affirmative defenses?
Okay, well, I'm not exactly sure what the debate was about that. I don't know firsthand, but I think it relates to whether there may be a legitimate self-defense issue in a homicide, for example, or in another violent case. So that's what I'm thinking, that you could, take that into consideration. And there may be other potential affirmative defenses, but that's the one that jumps to my mind. I don't know, Ms. Nodoff, any others that you think of?
No, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So you could say, well, if you have it's a violent crime, but maybe, under all the circumstances, maybe, for self-defense and, so. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judge.
These committees for decades. Usually about long committee. Remember that? The face of the jail?
Okay, yeah, and I just want to say that because of what I heard here over the last couple months when this discussion first came up, and then talk about the video last month, and then the video was sent out early this week or last week. It's really helped me, and I've had over a dozen conversations with people about it because, as you probably have heard, there are groups and people and networks that are adamantly vote this way on all of them because they're all a ploy for turnout or whatever. And it was really helpful for me to have that video and to have the firsthand knowledge of the discussions here to talk to people so they can at least think about it in a different way. So I really appreciate it. Number 6 on the agenda, no items placed at the request of the chair. Number 7, consideration of actions to be taken by the Judiciary and Law Committee. Emergency management, repurposing monies from completing WISCOM project to funding a county-wide radio study. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So we've had these monies in our budget since I believe 2015. And we've been carrying them forward, I think, since 2019. And it is the last payment of a radio project that was started, around that 2013, 2014 timeframe. And at this point, we would like to repurpose that money to do a countywide study of our communications system, and possibly move away from the current communication system that we have, which is a statewide communication system called Wiscom. There are deficiencies in the system that we currently have, and we would like to take the money and use it to purchase a study to have someone go through our entire system and look at Dunn County and come back with a proposal of what we could do to increase our communications here in the county. So I have met with Chris and the sheriff and Nick on different occasions, and most recently, and it was a consensus that this money that we have would be best spent to hire a consultant to take a look at what we have and what our needs are, and come up with a plan so that we could, assess that plan and look at moving forward.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thanks. What amount of monies do you have? And do you have any idea what it's gonna cost to do this survey?
We have $78,000, and I do not have an exact amount as to what it's going to cost. I actually have a meeting coming up with a consultant to kind of get an idea. I was digging through some of our old files, and it's been years since we've hired anybody to do this, and so I don't have an idea. And as we're looking at communications, I just want to make you aware that it's not just probably law enforcement communications we would look at. We would look at the Dunn Fire EMS frequency, which, basically is used by our volunteer departments out in the county. So you're looking like Boyceville Fire, Boyceville EMS, Sand Creek Fire. I think that as long as we're doing a communications project, it should encompass all of that. And after, sitting with Dustin on Saturday, at the CIP meeting, and he talked about their communications, definitely that would be something that, as long as we're doing a study, we should look at all of these communication, kind of areas together. And of course, if you build the infrastructure, everybody can just kind of, hop on whatever infrastructure we build, but it's something that I think they all need to be looked at, and, a plan for the entire, county communications for several different agencies, not just law enforcement, needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does this committee need to take any action on this today? Katie?
I guess the way that Chris, made it sound was we just needed your approval to move forward to repurpose the funds. And it didn't really need to go to any further committees, right, Kevin?
That's the way I'm.
Yeah, it was just, if you approve me repurposing the funds from, it's all in the communications family. It's not like we're moving it and using it for a whole different project. It's just, we're going to repurpose it to kind of take a step back and have a study done to give us a really good idea of where we're at and where we may need to go. So.
Okay. Well, we probably don't need one officially, but can I get a motion and Supervisor? Bauer?
Also move.
Supervisor Gilbert to repurpose the money with emergency management. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Consideration of reports, resolutions, and ordinances. There are none today. And number 9 on the agenda, announcements. Anybody have any announcements?
So Chairman, I see the medical examiner has shown up, so I just didn't know if she had any comments,
you.
and she's in the back.
Welcome, Marcia. Thank you. That's all right. Good to see you. Anybody have any questions for the medical examiner? Nope. Thank you. All right. So next meeting is April 24th 4:30 PM in this room, and we are adjourned.